Hey folks, it's Kim from Raven Kim Woodwinds. Thank you for clicking on this video and welcome to the channel. For today's video, I'm finally going to be tackling a highly requested comment that I get, and that is a tutorial on how to play the Xun. The Xun is an ancient Chinese vessel flute made out of clay. It's similar to what we now know as the ocarina, but it's much older and it's a bit more nuanced in terms of how to play the instrument. What excites me the most about these instruments is their long history. Archaeologically, the oldest Xun can be traced as far back as 7,000 years ago. Now, as I mentioned, they are a close relative of today's ocarinas, but they are a bit different. This is an ocarina, and this is a Xun. Ocarinas have a mouthpiece. An ocarina has this windway that directs it to a sharp edge called the fipple, and that splits the airstream in half to produce a sound. A Xun, on the other hand, only has this opening, and the way you play it is you play it like you would making a note with a bottle. You blow across that opening and open your fingers one by one to change the pitch. They are both vessel flutes. Although the ocarina is much easier to play than the Xun has a few strengths over the ocarina. One is dynamic range. Because your mouth is the windway, you're able to change the air volume that goes into the instrument, thus affecting the volume that you play at. And another one is expression. You are able to bend notes on a Xun that you aren't able to do so on an ocarina. Alright, so jumping into the tutorial. Maybe you have a Xun on the way, maybe you're planning to order one. Maybe you have one sitting on your shelf that you tried to play but eventually gave up on because you found it too hard. When people first get their Xun, the most common mistake that I see is people focus too much on the fingering chart. With Xun, the fingering patterns vary greatly. Some of the instruments have fingering patterns suited for playing Chinese classical music. Some of them have patterns that are more suited for playing Western music. And some of them even have fingering patterns that are borrowed from other instruments like ocarinas or recorders or flutes. Regardless of what kind of Xun you have, the fundamental aspect of this instrument is being able to create a consistent sound. So, our lesson begins with the embouchure. Embouchure means the position of your mouth and your oral cavity to create a windway that produces the sound. It's best to start by understanding how sound is produced on these instruments. So, you have this opening, and what you do is you blow across that opening in such a way that it hits this sharp edge. And what that does is it splits the windway in two. That splitting of the windway creates a vibration of the air, which in turn produces sounds or musical notes. So to start with, have all of the finger holes closed, and then blow across the top. Very easy to get a note that way. The difficulty comes when you start opening the finger holes, and the instrument becomes much more unforgiving with how accurate you are with your breath. See, even just altering the angle of your breath or the opening of your embouchure a bit can drastically affect the sound. It can make it sound airy, it can make it sound out of pitch, and these problems can be addressed by again being consistent with how your embouchure is positioned. Now, where people usually start is imagining that you are spitting out watermelon seeds. You create a very small opening between your lips, very narrow, and try to blow a very narrow stream of air on that edge. Now, you have to feel where that sharp edge is. Put the instrument up against your lips, and then angle it in such a way that you get a better idea where that sharp edge is. Once you get a feel for that, tilt the instrument back to playing position. and blow a steady stream of air. Don't jump straight into playing notes. Focus on consistency first. One tip that really helped me when I was starting out was learning to play with as little air as possible. When you play the Xun, it almost feels like breathing into the instrument rather than blowing into it. By adopting this mindset of using as little air as possible, it forces you to be more accurate with where you point that air stream. It forces you to use as little air as possible and be efficient. When I was starting out, I was using so much air that I was getting dizzy, but this step really helped me out. So once you're consistent with that note with all of the finger holes closed, play the next one. And do the same thing. Sustain that note for as long and as consistent as you can, using as little air as possible, and go up the scale from there. Don't rush into it. Focus on consistency. You're going to notice that the higher up you go in the scale, the more difficult it is to play. Because the more holes you have open, the more you have to be accurate with your airstream. This isn't the kind of thing that you can learn just by reading or listening, but it's something that you pick up with practice. Muscle memory is very important when playing the Xun. So just keep on playing those notes consistently. Now, as I mentioned, with this instrument, the higher you go up the scale, the more difficult it is to produce a consistent sound. So when you're starting to learn your first melodies, I recommend looking for songs that start on the lower end of the scale and slowly working your way up. And again, don't focus on speed, don't focus on playing the song at full tempo, focus on the individual notes first. And once you can play it slowly but consistently, it's all going to fall together. So pick a song that starts at the lower end of the scale. As you get better, as you get more consistent, look for tunes that use the higher end of the scale. Play slowly, use as little air as possible, really narrow down that airstream, spitting the smallest watermelon seeds that you can, and then once you get consistent, that's when you can focus on the fingering. Now, I mentioned this before, Xun fingering vary greatly from instrument to instrument, so unfortunately this isn't something that I can go too deep on in this video. It depends on the fingering chart, and that usually comes with your instrument, or if it doesn't, ask the maker. I'm going to demonstrate some of the common fingering that you have on Xun. This is a traditional Chinese fingering. You have to cross-finger your way up the scale in order to play the diatonic scale because it's primarily made to play in a pentatonic mode. Playing pentatonically, it sounds like this. Here's one that's more suited for playing Western music. You see it has 6 finger holes on the top and 2 thumb holes on the back. And you can think of the 6 finger holes as something like a tin whistle or an Irish flute. Lifting your fingers one by one from right to left produces a diatonic scale. And this one is an even newer example of a Xun, where it borrows the English pendant fingering of an ocarina. So again, when it comes to the fingering patterns that you have to use with your instrument, you have to consult the chart that it came with or the maker of the instrument. Now, don't be discouraged. In my decades of playing various woodwind instruments, I found that the Xun was one of the most difficult to play. It was frustrating at the start, and I would get dizzy because I was very inefficient with my use of air and my embouchure was too loose, and it took me months, if not years, to even get a consistent sound. So don't get discouraged. It's an instrument that you're supposed to take slowly. When I was starting out, I approached it like meditation. I was just focusing on playing notes and improvising on the scale rather than playing full songs. And eventually, once you look at it as a source of comfort, as a source of meditation, good playing comes along with it. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope I helped encourage you to learn the instrument and not give up on it. Remember, all good things take time.